What do you two? B Kelly back again with another banger video. In today's video, y'all, I am going to be talking about OU and Texas moving to the SEC and the situation the Big 12 is in currently. I'm going to be going in a lot of depth about what's going on right now, as this is a hot topic in the college football world and the sports world, period. But before I move on with this video, remember to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, as it does help grow the channel, as we are on the road to 10K. Now let's get into it. Obviously, the first thing that I do have to bring up is that we have to talk about what happened in the very beginning, and that is OU and Texas wanting out of the Big 12, and ultimately announcing they want to be in the SEC, and it's really starting to shape up that they will end up in the SEC sometime soon. Whether it will be earlier than 2025 or 2025 when their contract with the Big 12 ends. According to multiple sources, OU and Texas have been in contact with the SEC since December to January in early 2020 and late 2019. They've been planning this move for a while, and it really got curtailed by the pandemic that started up in 2020. Obviously, that kind of slowed things down, and now it's starting to ramp up a lot recently, and it was leaked by the Houston Chronicle. There are a lot of reasons why OU and Texas want to make this move to the SEC. Now, everyone knows the SEC is talked about as the best conference in all of college football. It is also the conference that makes the most money. Money does have a huge influence in OU and Texas going to the SEC. Now, this is not the first time that Texas and or OU have tried to leave the Big 12, as in 2011, they actually both tried to go to the Pac-12 with a couple other Big 12 teams, but the Pac-12 ultimately said no. OU and Texas are some of the most recognizable brands in all of college football and college sports, period. Everybody knows who Texas and OU are. Both schools generate a lot of money in their college sports, especially college football, in which they are their biggest sports. And ultimately, it does not seem like either school likes their deal currently with the Big 12. And obviously, if you move to the SEC, the biggest and most known conference in all of college football, you're going to make way more money. You're going to be on TV more. Even though both teams are already on TV a lot, you're going to have way more premier games. You're going to have better scheduling times. All the above. There are obviously some other reasons why a team like OU and Texas would like to move to the SEC. Even though they already both recruit pretty good, the recruiting in the SEC for both of those schools, especially with NIL being passed and all of that, their schools' recruiting is just going to keep on going up, and being in the top conference in college football, or said to be the top conference, the recruiting is just going to skyrocket even more, even though it is already good. Both of these teams as well will be facing some tougher competition in the SEC that is ultimately going to be preparing you better for the bigger games. Now, this kind of goes more for OU right now, as if you've been keeping up with any college football at all, OU has been running the Big 12 pretty easily, as they've won 6 straight conference titles, but have yet to still win a playoff game. While Texas, on the other hand, Texas this past decade, it has been kind of tough for them in college football, as they've been disappointing for the most part. Another point that I would like to make before I stop talking about the details behind why they would want to leave the Big 12 for the SEC is if one of the teams leave, for example, if Texas leaves, OU is going to leave. If OU leaves, Texas is going to leave. They're ultimately going to be following each other no matter what. OU and Texas, they are always going to be together. It does not matter how good the other team is and how mediocre the other team is as well. OU and Texas literally hate each other, but that does not matter, as they're both going to follow each other no matter what. Now, let's talk about what the SEC will look like with both OU and Texas in it, as they're going to have to do some realigning in the conference, as you cannot just put both of those teams in the West, as it's going to make things really uneven with the East versus West. They might take out the conferences as a whole inside the SEC. They might do some realignment, or they might do the pod's proposal. Basically, here's how the pod proposal works out. You have 4-team pods, 9-game conference schedule format. play the other 3 teams in your pod every season, play 2 games against each of the other pods, host every team at least once every 4 seasons. Plus, you would still have non-conference schedules as well. And how they would have a conference champion at the end of the year is kind of like a tournament bracket kind of thing, where you take the top teams from each pod and put them in this tournament style of play, and they each go in this tournament, and whoever ends up winning it all is ultimately the team that is the SEC champion. I like the idea of pods in the SEC. I think it is a unique and cool idea, but I will say the rumored end-of-season conference tournament with the top teams from each pod, I will say I do not know if I exactly mess with that, but if it happens, it happens. If you want to know what the pods would look like, you would have OU, Texas, Missouri, and Arkansas all in one pod, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt in one, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, and South Carolina in one as well, and the final one, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. It is expected that the SEC is going to accept both OU and Texas, even though there is one team in particular that does not want this to happen, especially with Texas, and that school is Texas A&M, that has already reached out to governments in Texas to ban this move from happening, and there's even Texas lawmakers that do not want Texas to go to the SEC and leaving the Big 12. But what does this mean for the Big 12, knowing that the 2 teams that are most known in their conference are leaving? A lot of people think this is a sign that the Big 12 is officially going to die off and fade into oblivion right off the bat, as these are the 2 most recognizable teams in their conference and the 2 teams that generate the most money for the Big 12 in OU and Texas. With the news of this happening, there are already Big 12 teams reaching out to other conferences such as the Pac-12 and the Big 10, just to name a couple, that are trying to ask if they can join, and they are talking to them right now as I speak. As of right now, it looks like only OU and Texas are the only confirmed teams that are leaving, but do not be surprised if more do leave the conference eventually as well. Now, people think the Big 12 is just going to die right off the bat, but personally, I do not think that's going to happen. I think the Big 12 will expand and get some non-Power 5 teams to join the conference, and I do not think that all the Big 12 teams are going to leave the conference as well, as some of them might not even be able to leave the Big 12, period. In recent developments, the Big 12 Conference is offering a proposal where both Texas and OU are going to make more money in their conference, while other teams will start to lose some more money, but it really depends if the other teams actually agree on it. Now, obviously, there are college football fans out there, especially Big 12 fans, that want their schools to agree on it, but that's not always a guarantee if the schools are going to agree on it or not, as money is money, and money is what ultimately drives these schools and programs. And even with this proposal, there is no guarantee that Texas or OU are going to accept it. They might just go to the SEC no matter what. There are some positives with going to the SEC and some negatives, obviously, for both teams. And there's a lot of college football fans out there that worry this is going to be a death of a Power 5 conference in the Big 12, and that this is going to potentially lead to super conferences in college football, where eventually more teams are going to join the SEC, and they're going to form basically their own college conference outside of the NCAA, where they're going to have 20-plus teams basically in one conference competing at a very high level on their own. Before I end this video, drop something down in the comment section below of how you think OU and Texas will potentially do in the SEC. And before you head out, remember to smash that like button, turn on them post notifications, and subscribe for more videos. B. Kelly out.